The rattlesnake's warning came too late, its fangs already striking toward the leather of his boot when hands stronger than he expected pulled him backward with such force that both bodies tumbled into the desert scrub. Thomas Thorne hit the ground hard, his breath knocked from his lungs, staring up at the fierce, dark eyes of an Apache woman whose knife was already flashing through the air to pin the serpent's head to the earth before it could strike again. It was June 1877, in the unforgiving landscape outside Placerville, California, where the gold rush had long since faded but desperate men still clawed at the mountains hoping for fortune. And Thomas had been one of those fools until 30 seconds ago when his entire world narrowed to the woman now standing over him, breathing hard, her long black hair falling loose from its ties. "You walk through the desert like a blind mule," she said in English that carried only the slightest accent, her voice low and controlled despite the danger that had just passed. "The snake gave you warning. You did not listen." Thomas scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs as he looked at the dead rattler, then back at the woman who had saved his life. She was tall for a woman, lean and strong, dressed in a mixture of Apache and settler clothing that spoke of someone who moved between worlds. Her face was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten, all sharp angles and smooth bronze skin, but it was her eyes that held him, dark and deep, and filled with something he could not quite name. Sorrow, perhaps, or a loneliness that mirrored his own. "I owe you my life," he managed, his voice rough from the dust and shock. She pulled her knife from the snake's skull with a quick, practiced motion and wiped the blade on the dry grass. "Life debts are dangerous things, cowboy. Go back to your town and forget you saw me." But Thomas Thorne was not the kind of man who forgot easily, especially not something like this. He watched as she turned to leave, moving with a grace that seemed impossible in the rough terrain, and something in him refused to let her simply walk away. "Wait," he called out. "At least tell me your name." She paused, her back still to him, and for a moment he thought she would not answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely carrying over the hot wind that swept across the hills. "Tala Ashcroft. My mother was Apache. My father was a missionary who thought he could save her soul." There was bitterness in those words, old and deep. "He is dead now. She is dead now. I am what remains." "Tala," Thomas repeated, the name feeling right on his tongue. "I am Thomas Thorne. I work a claim up in the hills, or what is left of one. There is not much gold anymore, but I am too stubborn to quit." She turned then, studying him with those penetrating eyes, and he felt as though she could see straight through to his bones, reading all the disappointments and failures and lonely nights he had endured in this harsh land. "Stubbornness will get you killed out here, Thomas Thorne. You should learn to listen better to the land and to the creatures that know it better than you." "Then teach me," he said, the words coming out before he had fully thought them through. "You saved my life today. Let me repay that debt, but also let me save you from something too." Her expression shifted, becoming guarded, almost angry. "Save me? From what?" Thomas took a step closer, his hat in his hands now, turning it nervously. He was not a man comfortable with exposing his heart, but something about this moment about her demanded honesty. "From the same thing I see in my own mirror every morning. Loneliness. The kind that eats at you slow, day after day, until you forget what it feels like to share a smile or a meal or a conversation that matters." Tala stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable, and Thomas thought he had made a terrible mistake, had overstepped in a way that would drive her away forever. Then something in her expression cracked, just slightly, and he saw the vulnerability beneath the hard exterior she wore like armor. "You know nothing about my loneliness, cowboy," she said softly, but there was less bite in the words now. You know nothing about what it is to belong to two worlds and be welcome in neither. To have your mother's people look at you and see your father's blood, and to have your father's people look at you and see only a savage. You are right, Thomas admitted. I do not know that particular pain. But I know what it is to be adrift, to wake each day with no purpose beyond surviving until the next. I know what it is to work yourself to exhaustion so you are too tired to feel the emptiness. And I know that when you pulled me away from that snake, for just a moment, I felt something I had not felt in years, connected to another human being. Tala looked away, toward the distant hills where the late afternoon sun was beginning to cast long shadows. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost vulnerable. There is a stream about 2 miles from here where the water runs cool even in summer. I go there sometimes when the heat becomes too much. If you follow the canyon north, you will find it. She glanced back at him. If you happen to be there tomorrow at sunset, I would not send you away. Before Thomas could respond, she was moving again, disappearing into the landscape with the ease of someone who knew every rock and hollow. He stood watching until she was gone, his heart still racing but for entirely different reasons now. Then he began the walk back to his small claim, his mind full of dark eyes and the promise of tomorrow. Thomas spent that night unable to sleep, tossing on his bedroll in the tiny shack he had built near his claim. The place was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, with a small stove, a table, and a few shelves holding his meager possessions. He had come to California 5 years ago, in 1872, full of dreams about striking it rich like the 49ers before him. But the easy gold was long gone, and men like him scratched at the earth for flakes and dust, making barely enough to keep themselves fed and supplied. He had been married once, back in Missouri. Sarah had been her name, and she had been pretty and practical, and had loved him in a quiet, steady way. But fever had taken her in the winter of 1871, and Thomas had fled west, because staying in a place filled with her memory had been more than he could bear. He had thought that work and distance would heal him, but instead he had simply grown hollow, going through the motions of living without truly being alive. Until today. Until Tala Ashcroft had crashed into his existence and reminded him that his heart could still beat faster, that he could still feel curiosity and attraction and hope. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. Thomas tried to work his claim, but his mind kept wandering to the coming evening. He bathed in the creek near his shack, scrubbing away the worst of the dirt and grime. He put on his cleanest shirt, which was not saying much, and made sure his hair was combed back. He felt foolish, like a boy preparing for his first dance, but he could not help himself. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Thomas made his way north through the canyon Tala had indicated. The landscape here was rugged and beautiful, all rocky outcroppings and scattered pines, with the sound of running water growing louder as he walked. He found the stream exactly where she had suggested, a clear ribbon of water flowing over smooth stones, surrounded by willows that provided blessed shade. Tala was already there, sitting on a flat rock near the water's edge. She had her feet bare, her toes in the current, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked up as he approached, and Thomas saw something in her expression that had not been there yesterday, a tentative openness, as though she too had decided to take a risk. "You came," she said simply. "I said I would." Thomas settled onto a rock near her, not too close, not wanting to crowd her. "Thank you for inviting me." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water and the evening birds. It was not an uncomfortable quiet, but rather the kind that existed between people who were content just to share space. Finally, Tala spoke. "My mother's name was Little Dove. She was Kairikahua Apache from a band that ranged through Arizona before the Army began herding them onto reservations. My father, Jonathan Ashcroft, came west to bring the Christian God to the heathens, as he called them. He saw my mother and decided she would be his greatest conversion. Her voice was flat, reciting facts. She converted, not because she believed, but because her band was starving and he offered food and protection. They married in a Christian ceremony. I was born in 1855, which makes me 22 now. Thomas listened, not interrupting, sensing that she needed to tell this story in her own way. My father was not a cruel man, but he was blind in the way that zealots often are. He truly believed he was saving souls, saving my mother from damnation. He tried to erase everything Apache from our home. My mother was not allowed to speak her language or practice her traditions. She withered like a plant without sun. Tala's hands clenched in her lap. When I was 10, she killed herself, walked into the desert and simply did not come back. They found her body 3 days later. God, Tala, I am so sorry, Thomas said, the words inadequate but sincere. My father broke after that. He blamed himself, finally understood what he had done. He tried to make amends, learned Apache, tried to teach me the things my mother should have taught me. But it was too late, and he knew it. He drank himself to death over the next 4 years. I was 14 when he died, and I had no place to go. The Apache would not take me because I was tainted by white blood and white teaching. The whites would not take me because I was Apache, so I learned to survive alone. How did you manage? Thomas asked. I did whatever I had to do. I hunted, I trapped, I sold skins and meat in towns where no one knew me. I learned to read and write from my father, and I learned the ways of the desert from books he had about the Apache and from watching, always watching. Sometimes I worked for ranchers or farmers, doing jobs they could not find white women to do. I saved every cent I could. She looked at him directly now. I have a small piece of land about 10 miles from here near a spring. It is not much, but it is mine. I run a few cattle, grow some vegetables. I am building something, Thomas, a place where I can belong, even if I belong alone. Thomas heard the defiance in her voice, but also the exhaustion. She was tired of fighting, tired of proving herself, tired of the loneliness she claimed not to mind. He understood because he felt the same way. I came from Missouri, he said, offering his own story in exchange. I was married to a good woman named Sarah. We had a small farm, nothing fancy, but it was ours. We were going to have children, grow old together, all those dreams that young people have. Then fever came through one winter and took her and half the county besides. I could not stay there after that. Everything reminded me of her, of what I had lost. So I came west chasing gold and found only dirt and loneliness. You still love her? Tala asked, and there was no judgment in the question, only curiosity. Thomas considered carefully before answering. I will always love the memory of her and what we had together. But if I am honest, I have spent the last 6 years using that grief as a shield, a reason not to try again, not to risk my heart. It is easier to mourn the past than to face the present. Tala nodded slowly, as though he had confirmed something she already suspected. That is what loneliness does. It becomes comfortable in its own terrible way. You know how to live with it, and trying to change feels more frightening than staying as you are. Yes, Thomas agreed. Exactly that. He paused, then took a breath and continued. But yesterday, when you saved me and I looked into your eyes, I felt something shift, like waking up after a long sleep. And I thought, maybe it is time to stop hiding. Maybe it is time to try again, to reach out and see if someone might reach back. Tala was quiet for a long time, her gaze on the water. The sun was lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Finally, She turned to him. "I do not know how to do this, Thomas. I have never had anyone court me, never had a man look at me the way you are looking at me now. The white men see me as a curiosity or worse. The Apache men see me as an outsider. I have never been with a man, never kissed anyone, never even held hands. I am 22 years old and completely ignorant of these things." Her honesty struck him in the chest, vulnerable and brave at once. "I do not need you to know anything," Thomas said gently. "I just need you to be willing to try. We can figure out the rest together if you want. No pressure, no expectations. Just two lonely people trying to be a little less lonely." Tala studied him for another long moment. Then slowly, tentatively, she reached out her hand. Thomas took it, her fingers rough and calloused like his own, and they sat there as the sun set, holding hands beside a stream in the California wilderness. Two damaged souls beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, they deserved a second chance at happiness. Over the following weeks, Thomas and Tala began a careful courtship. He would finish his work at the claim each day and ride out to visit her at her small homestead. The place was modest but impressive given that she had built it all herself. A sturdy cabin with a stone chimney, a small barn for her 3 cattle and single horse, a vegetable garden that was thriving despite the heat, and a chicken coop with a handful of hens. "You have done amazing work here," Thomas said the first time she showed him around. "Most men could not have managed this alone." "Most men would have had help," Tala replied. "I had to learn everything the hard way through mistakes and failures, but it is mine and I am proud of it." Thomas could see that pride in every carefully chinked log, every straight fence post. Tala had carved a place for herself out of nothing, with only her own hands and determination. It humbled him and made him admire her even more. They fell into a routine. Thomas would help her with the heavier work, things that were difficult for one person alone. They repaired a section of the barn roof, built a new gate for the corral, dug a channel to bring more water from the spring to her garden. They worked side by side in companionable silence or easy conversation, learning each other's rhythms and ways. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of her cabin and talk as the desert cooled around them. Tala told him stories her mother had whispered to her in secret, Apache legends about Coyote the trickster and white-painted woman, and the mountain spirits. Thomas told her about Missouri, about seasons changing and green hills and rain that fell soft and steady, so different from the harsh land they now inhabited. "Would you ever want to go back?" Tala asked him one evening. Thomas shook his head. "No, there is nothing for me there now. My family is gone, Sarah is gone. This is my home now, for better or worse. Even though you have found no gold, even though you work yourself to exhaustion for barely enough to live on, even so," Thomas confirmed. "Though I will admit, these past weeks have given me more reason to stay than any gold ever could." Tala looked at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She was smiling more often now, he noticed. The hard edges of her were softening, not in a way that made her weak, but in a way that made her seem more fully human, more present. "I am glad you were too foolish to watch where you stepped that day," she said, and there was warmth in her voice. "I am glad you were watching out for foolish cowboys," he replied. They had not kissed yet, had barely touched beyond holding hands, but the tension between them was building, sweet and anticipatory. Thomas wanted to move at Tala's pace, to let her set the boundaries and decide when she was ready for more. He could sense her inexperience, her uncertainty, and the last thing he wanted was to rush her or make her uncomfortable. It was Tala who finally closed the distance between them. They were sitting on her porch one evening in late July, the air still warm but bearable, when she suddenly turned to him and said, "Thomas, Would you teach me how to kiss? The question was so direct, so vulnerable that Thomas felt his throat tighten with emotion. Are you sure? He asked. There is no hurry. I am sure, Tala said firmly. I am tired of being afraid, I am tired of not knowing, and I trust you. Those last words meant everything. Thomas shifted closer to her, moving slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When she did not pull away, he raised one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her smooth skin. Just follow what feels natural, he said softly. There is no right or wrong way. Then he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, gentle and careful. Tala went very still for a moment, and then she relaxed into the kiss, her lips moving against his with a tentative exploration that made his heart ache with tenderness. The kiss lasted only a few seconds before they pulled apart, but it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Tala's eyes were wide, her breathing unsteady. Oh, she said simply. Then, can we do that again? Thomas laughed, surprised and delighted by her directness. We can do that as many times as you want. They kissed again, longer this time, with more confidence. And then again, until the stars came out overhead and the desert night wrapped around them like a blanket. When they finally stopped, Tala rested her head on Thomas's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they sat there in perfect contentment, no longer quite so lonely. As summer deepened into August, their relationship continued to grow. Thomas found himself spending more time at Tala's homestead than at his own claim, and one evening he broached a subject that had been on his mind. Tala, I have been thinking. My claim is barely producing anything. I break my back for a few dollars worth of gold each week, and it is killing me slowly. What if I gave it up? What if I moved my things here and we worked this land together? We could build it into something real, something sustainable. Tala had been stirring a pot of stew over the fire, and she went very still at his words. You would give up your claim, your dream of gold. It was never really about gold, Thomas admitted. It was about having a reason to get up in the morning, a purpose. But I have found a better purpose now. You, us, building a life together. She set down the spoon and turned to face him fully. Thomas Thorne, are you asking to move in with me? I suppose I am, he said, suddenly nervous. If you will have me. I know we have only known each other for 2 months, and maybe that is too fast, but out here, life is uncertain. I do not want to waste time being cautious when I could be happy. Tala crossed the small cabin to stand in front of him. She took both his hands in hers, her grip strong and sure. I want that too. I want you here. I want to wake up and see your face. I want to build this ranch together, to have help and partnership and companionship. But Thomas, if you move here, people will talk. A white man living with an Apache woman, not married, they will call me terrible names. They will say you are crazy or that I have bewitched you. Are you prepared for that? Let them talk, Thomas said fiercely. I do not care what small-minded fools think. But Tala, if it would make things easier, if it would give you more protection and respectability, I would marry you tomorrow. I know it is fast, but I also know my own heart. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. Tala's eyes shone with tears, the first he had ever seen from her. You love me, she whispered. I love you, Thomas repeated, and saying it out loud felt like the truest thing he had ever spoken. I love your strength and your courage. I love how you built this place with your own hands. I love your directness and your vulnerability. I love the way you see the world and the way you have let me into your life, despite having every reason to keep people out. I love you, Tala Ashcroft, and if you will have me, I want to be your husband. A tear slipped down Tala's cheek, and then she was kissing him, fierce and passionate, pouring all her unspoken emotions into the press of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Thomas. I did not think I could, did not think I would ever trust anyone enough to let them that close. But you have been patient and kind, and you see me, really see me, not as Apache or white but just as Tala. I love you and I want to be your wife." They held each other as the stew bubbled forgotten on the stove, making promises and plans, two lonely souls who had found their home in each other's arms. Getting married, however, proved more complicated than they had anticipated. When Thomas went into Placerville to inquire about a marriage license, the clerk at the courthouse looked at him as though he had grown a second head. "You want to marry an Apache woman," the man said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Son, even if I was inclined to help you, which I am not, there are laws about such things. Indians are not citizens. They cannot own property, cannot vote, and there is considerable debate about whether marriages between Indians and whites are even legal." Thomas felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. Tala's father was white. She is half white, and she owns property, a homestead she built herself. You cannot tell me she has no rights. The clerk shrugged, unmoved. Take it up with the territorial government if you want. I am not issuing you a license to marry a squaw. Now get out of my office before I have you thrown out. Thomas wanted to reach across that desk and grab the man by his collar, but he knew that would only make things worse. Instead, he turned and walked out, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He rode back to Tala's homestead, fury and frustration warring in his chest. When he told her what had happened, Tala's face went carefully blank, the way it did when she was hurt but trying to hide it. "I told you this would happen," she said quietly. "I told you people would not accept us." "I do not care about their acceptance," Thomas said. "We will find another way. There has to be a preacher or a judge somewhere who will marry us, or we will go to another county, another state if we have to. I am not giving up on this, Tala. I am not giving up on us." Tala looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "There is a Franciscan mission about 3 days' ride from here near Sacramento. The priest there, Father Miguel, he knew my father. He was kind to my mother when others were not. We could try him." "Then that is what we will do," Thomas said firmly. They left 2 days later, after making arrangements for the livestock and packing supplies for the journey. The ride to Sacramento was long and hot, following rough trails through the foothills. They camped under the stars at night, and despite the uncertainty of their situation, Thomas found those nights to be some of the happiest of his life. Lying beside Tala under the vast sky, talking and laughing and stealing kisses, he felt more alive than he had in years. The mission, when they reached it, was a simple affair. A small adobe church with a bell tower, surrounded by a few outbuildings and a vegetable garden. An old Mexican priest with kind eyes answered their knock, and his face lit up when he saw Tala. "Little Tala," he said in accented English. "Can it truly be you? You were just a child when I last saw you after your father's funeral. Look at you now, all grown into a woman." "Hello, Father Miguel," Tala said, and there was genuine affection in her voice. "I am sorry I did not come to visit before now. Life has been difficult." "It always is, child," the priest said gently. Then he looked at Thomas. "And who is this young man?" "This is Thomas Thorne," Tala said. "He is the man I love and we wish to be married, but the courthouse in Placerville refused to issue us a license because I am Apache. We came to ask if you would marry us anyway." Father Miguel's expression grew serious. He invited them inside, offered them water and a place to sit, and then he regarded them both carefully. "I will not lie to you. Marrying you could cause me trouble with the authorities. They do not like it when priests ignore their laws and restrictions. But I also know that God's law is higher than man's law, and in God's eyes, all souls are equal. If you two love each other and wish to be joined in holy matrimony, I will perform the ceremony. But I must ask, are you both prepared for the hardships this marriage will bring, the prejudice and discrimination you will face? We are, Thomas said without hesitation. I would rather face a lifetime of hardship with Tala than a comfortable life without her. And I would rather be scorned as Thomas's wife than safe and alone, Tala added. Father Miguel smiled, and it was a smile of deep warmth and compassion. Then I will marry you, and may God bless your union. Can you stay for 2 days while I prepare? There are formalities, even here, and I would like to do this properly. They agreed, and Father Miguel gave them a small room in one of the outbuildings to share. That night, as they lay side by side on narrow cots pushed together, Tala whispered, "Are you sure, Thomas? You could still change your mind. Find a nice white woman who would give you an easier life." Thomas rolled to face her, even though he could barely see her in the darkness. "I do not want an easier life. I want you, only you, always you. Stop trying to push me away, Tala. I am not going anywhere." She was quiet for a moment, and then he felt her hand find his, fingers interlacing. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid that I am not enough, that I do not know how to be a wife, that you will regret this choice." "I am afraid too," Thomas confessed. "I am afraid that I will fail you somehow, that I will not be able to protect you from the cruelty of the world. But Tala, being afraid is not a reason not to try. If we wait until we are not afraid, we will wait forever. We just have to trust each other and hold on tight." "Hold on tight," Tala repeated, and he heard the smile in her voice. "I can do that." 2 days later, on a warm August afternoon in 1877, Thomas Thorne and Tala Ashcroft were married in the small chapel of the Franciscan mission. There were no guests except for Father Miguel and an elderly nun who served as witness. Tala wore a simple dress of pale blue that the nun had helped her sew, and Thomas wore his cleanest clothes with his hair slicked back. The ceremony was in Latin and English, the words ancient and powerful, binding them together in the eyes of God if not in the eyes of California law. When Father Miguel pronounced them man and wife and told Thomas he could kiss his bride, Thomas did so with his whole heart, feeling Tala's tears on her cheeks mixing with his own. They were married. Against all odds and obstacles, they were married. The return journey to their homestead was even happier than the trip to Sacramento. They rode close together, sometimes racing their horses, sometimes just walking side by side and talking about their future. Thomas had never felt so light, so free, as though a weight he had been carrying for years had finally been lifted from his shoulders. When they reached home, Thomas lifted Tala down from her horse, and then, on impulse, swept her up into his arms to carry her over the threshold of the cabin. She laughed, surprised and delighted, her arms around his neck. "What are you doing?" she asked. "It is tradition," Thomas said, grinning. "The groom carries the bride over the threshold of their home. It is supposed to bring good luck." "We need all the luck we can get," Tala said, but she was smiling as he carried her inside and gently set her down. That night, they consummated their marriage with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Thomas was careful with Tala, knowing this was her first time, and she responded to him with a combination of nervousness and enthusiasm that he found endearing. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, their hearts still racing. "That was wonderful," Tala whispered, her head on Thomas's chest. "I did not know it could be like that." "It will only get better," Thomas promised, stroking her hair. "As we learn each other, as we grow together." "I love you, husband," Tala said, testing out the word. "I love you, wife," Thomas replied, and they fell asleep holding each other, content and complete. The months that followed were not easy, but they were good. Thomas officially abandoned his gold claim and moved all his possessions to Tala's homestead, which was now their homestead. They worked from dawn until dark, building up the ranch. Thomas used the last of his savings to buy 4 more cattle and another horse. They expanded the garden, built a better chicken coop, and started planning a larger barn for when the herd grew. The reaction in Placerville was about what they had expected. When Thomas went into town for supplies, people stared and whispered. Some shopkeepers refused to serve him. Others were merely cold, making it clear they disapproved of his choice of wife. But there were a few people who surprised him with their kindness. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store, was one of them. She was a widow in her 50s who had run the store alone since her husband died. The first time Thomas came in after his marriage, she looked him up and down and said, "I hear you went and married an Apache woman." Thomas braced himself for condemnation. "Yes, madam. Her name is Tala, and she is the finest person I have ever known." Mrs. Henderson studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good for you. Life is too short to care what fools think. What can I get for you today?" Thomas was so surprised he almost forgot his list. From that day on, Mrs. Henderson was always fair with him, never cheating on prices or quality the way some other merchants did. She even set aside special items sometimes, things she thought Tala might like. Another ally came from an unexpected source. Tom Talbot was a rancher with a large spread about 15 miles from their homestead. He was known as a tough but fair man, someone who had built his fortune through hard work rather than inheritance. One day in September, he rode up to their homestead while Thomas was mending fence. "You Thomas Thorne," the man called out. "I am," Thomas replied cautiously, wondering if this was trouble. "I am Tom Talbot. I own the Triple T Ranch over the ridge. I hear you and your wife are trying to build up a cattle operation." "We are," Thomas confirmed. "It is slow going, but we are making progress." Talbot dismounted and came closer, his weathered face unreadable. "I also hear you are having trouble in town because your wife is Apache." Thomas tensed, his hand tightening on the fence post. "If you came here to add to that trouble, you can turn around and leave." Talbot held up his hands. "Easy now. I did not come to cause problems. I came to offer help. See, I do not care what color a person's skin is or who their parents were. I care whether they are honest and hard-working. I have seen your wife in town a few times over the years, and she always struck me as someone who held her head high despite everything. And anyone who can homestead alone in this country has my respect." Thomas relaxed slightly. "What kind of help are you offering?" "I need hands at my ranch, especially during spring calving and fall roundup. The pay is not great, but it is honest work, and it would give you steady income to supplement what you make from your own herd. I also have a bull I could lend you for breeding purposes, no charge. Good bloodlines. Help you build up your stock." Thomas was stunned by the generosity of the offer. "Why would you do this for us?" Talbot shrugged. "Like I said, I respect hard work and honesty. Also, my late wife was Mexican, and we faced our share of prejudice when we first married. I know what it is like to swim against the current, so what do you say? You interested in working for me part-time?" "I am very interested," Thomas said, shaking the man's hand. "Thank you, Mr. Talbot. You do not know what this means to us." "Call me Tom," the rancher said. "And bring your wife by the ranch sometime. My daughter runs the place with me now, and she would probably enjoy meeting another strong woman who does not take nonsense from anyone." When Thomas told Tala about the offer that evening, she was as surprised and pleased as he had been. "Tom Talbot. I know of him. He has a reputation for being fair but tough. If he is offering work, it is a good opportunity. And having that steady income will make a real difference," Thomas said. "We can buy more cattle, improve our infrastructure. This could be exactly what we need to get ahead." Tala smiled, and it was the kind of smile that lit up her entire face, transforming her from beautiful to radiant. "We are going to make this work, Thomas. Against all odds, we are going to build something lasting." "We already have," Thomas said, pulling her into his arms. "We have each other. Everything else is just details." That winter tested them in ways they had not anticipated. The weather turned harsh, with storms rolling in from the Pacific and dropping cold rain that turned the trails to mud. One of their cows got sick and died despite their best efforts to save her. The roof of the cabin sprang a leak, and they spent a miserable week sleeping in the barn while Thomas made repairs. But through it all, they had each other. On the coldest nights, they would huddle together under blankets, sharing body heat and stories. Tala taught Thomas words in the Apache language, and he taught her songs from his childhood in Missouri. They laughed at their mistakes and celebrated their small victories. Thomas worked for Tom Talbot 3 days a week, learning more about ranching than he had ever known before. The work was hard, physical labor that left him exhausted, but it was satisfying in a way prospecting had never been. He was building something real, contributing to something larger than himself. Tala managed the homestead while Thomas was away, proving herself more than capable. She was an excellent shot with a rifle, and she hunted regularly to supplement their food supply. She also had a gift for training animals, and she began working with their horses, teaching them commands and manners that made them more valuable. In the spring of 1878, Tala began to suspect she was pregnant. She said nothing at first, not wanting to get Thomas's hopes up until she was certain. But when 2 months had passed without her monthly courses and she began feeling sick in the mornings, she knew it was time to tell him. They were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "Thomas, there is something I need to tell you. I am carrying a child, our child." Thomas went very still, his eyes wide with shock and then joy. "You are certain?" he whispered. "I am certain," Tala confirmed. "We are going to be parents probably sometime in early November." Thomas let out a whoop of pure happiness and swept Tala up into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We are having a baby. Tala, we are having a baby. Put me down before you make me dizzy," she said, but she was laughing too, caught up in his infectious joy. Thomas set her down carefully as though she were made of glass. "Are you feeling well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting more? I am feeling fine, just a little sick in the mornings. And I am pregnant, Thomas, not dying. I can still work and ride and do everything I normally do." But Thomas fussed over her anyway, insisting she take breaks more often, that she not lift anything heavy, that she eat more and rest more. Tala found his concern both touching and slightly exasperating, but she allowed it because she knew it came from a place of love. As her pregnancy progressed and became visible, Tala faced even more hostility when she went into town. Women would cross the street to avoid her. Men would make crude comments just loud enough for her to hear. Once, someone threw a rotten tomato at her, spattering her dress with pulp and seeds. Thomas was furious when he heard about the incident. "You are not going into town alone anymore," he declared. "I will go with you, or we will have things delivered, but I will not have you subjected to that treatment." "Thomas, I have faced worse than rotten tomatoes," Tala said, though her voice was tight with suppressed anger. "I will not let them drive me into hiding. It is not about hiding. It is about protecting you and our child. Please, Tala, for my peace of mind if nothing else." She could see the genuine worry in his eyes and she relented. "All right, we will go together when we need to go, but I will not apologize for existing, Thomas. I will not make myself small to make them comfortable." "I would never ask you to," Thomas assured her. "You are perfect exactly as you are. In late October, as Tala's due date approached, they made preparations. Mrs. Henderson from the general store, bless her heart, helped them find a midwife who was willing to attend the birth. Her name was Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come to California with her husband during the gold rush and stayed after he died. She had decades of experience delivering babies in a calm, competent manner that put Tala at ease. "You are healthy and strong," Mrs. Chen told Tala during her examination. "This baby will come when it is ready, and you will do fine. First babies take their time, so do not be surprised if labor lasts many hours. Your husband should boil water and have clean linens ready, and then stay out of the way until it is over." Labor started on a cold November night, just a few days after Tala's due date. Thomas woke to find Tala gripping his arm, her face contorted with pain. "The baby is coming," she said through gritted teeth. Thomas leapt out of bed, his heart racing. He had faced down claim jumpers and dangerous animals and harsh weather, but nothing had prepared him for the fear he felt watching Tala in pain. He sent word to Mrs. Chen, and then did everything the midwife had instructed, boiling water and preparing linens and trying not to panic. Mrs. Chen arrived within an hour, her calm presence immediately soothing. She examined Tala and pronounced that everything was progressing normally. "It will be several more hours at least," she told Thomas. "You can stay if you want, but many men prefer to wait outside." "I am staying," Thomas said firmly, taking Tala's hand. "I will not leave her." Tala squeezed his hand, her eyes fierce despite the pain. "I am glad you are here," she said. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Thomas stayed by Tala's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. He had never felt so helpless, watching her suffer and being unable to do anything to ease it. But he also felt a profound respect for her strength. The way she endured the pain without complaint, drawing on reserves of courage he could only marvel at. Finally, as dawn light was beginning to seep through the cabin windows, Mrs. Chen said, "It is time to push. When the next pain comes, bear down hard." Tala pushed with everything she had, her face red with effort, and Thomas felt his heart break and soar at the same time. After several more pushes, a baby's cry filled the cabin, thin and strong and absolutely perfect. "You have a son, Mrs. Chen announced, holding up a tiny, squirming, red-faced infant. "A healthy boy." Thomas looked at his son, at this tiny person he had helped create, and felt tears streaming down his face. Tala was crying too, reaching for the baby with trembling hands. Mrs. Chen cleaned the infant quickly and then placed him in Tala's arms, where he immediately quieted, as though he knew he was with his mother. "He is beautiful," Tala whispered, gazing down at their son with wonder. "Thomas, look at what we made." Thomas leaned in close, touching one finger to the baby's tiny fist, which immediately closed around it. "He is perfect," Thomas said, "just like his mother." They named him Tobias James Thorne, Tobias after Thomas's father and James after the middle name that Jonathan Ashcroft had used. Toby for short. He had a thick shock of dark hair, skin that was a beautiful blend of both his parents' tones, and eyes that would eventually settle into a deep brown. He was, in Thomas's completely unbiased opinion, the most magnificent baby ever born. The first few months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Toby was a good baby overall, but he still needed to be fed every few hours, day and night. Thomas and Tala took turns walking the floor with him when he fussed, singing lullabies in 2 languages. They marveled at every tiny milestone, his first smile, the way he learned to track movement with his eyes, the strength of his grip. Tom Talbot rode out to meet Toby when he was a month old, bringing gifts of baby clothes and a hand-carved wooden rattle. "Fine-looking boy," he pronounced. "Strong. He will be riding horses before you know it." Mrs. Henderson sent a basket of supplies with Thomas the next time he went into town: soft blankets, cloth for diapers, and a beautiful hand-knitted cap. "For the baby," she said gruffly. "Every child deserves a warm head, even Mrs." Chen stopped by periodically to check on Tala and Toby, refusing payment for her continued care. "You have given me a purpose," she told them. "Since my husband died, I have had few people who treat me with kindness. You and Mrs. Henderson are among them. This is my way of saying thank you." But not everyone was kind. One day in the spring of 1879, when Toby was about 6 months old, 3 men rode up to the homestead while Thomas was away working for Tom Talbot. Tala was in the garden with Toby in a cradle nearby when she heard the horses approaching. She recognized 2 of the men from town, troublemakers who spent more time drinking than working. The third was a stranger, but his face had the same mean look as his companions. Tala straightened up slowly, her hand moving to the rifle she always kept within reach. "Well, well," one of the men said, his words slurred with drink. "If it is not the squaw and her half-breed brat." Tala's hand closed on the rifle, bringing it up in one smooth motion to aim at the speaker. "Leave now," she said, her voice cold and steady. "You are not welcome here." The man laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "You going to shoot us, squaw? You and what army?" "I do not need an army," Tala said. "I just need 1 bullet for each of you, and I have many more than 3 bullets. I was hunting game before I could read. I do not miss." "Now I will say this one more time. Leave." The men exchanged glances, clearly not having expected armed resistance. The stranger, perhaps more sober than the others, said, "Come on, this is not worth it. Let's go." "Yeah, we were just passing through anyway," another said, already turning his horse. They rode off, but not before one of them spat in Tala's direction. She kept the rifle trained on them until they were out of sight, then sagged with relief. Her hands were shaking, her heart pounding. She picked up Toby from his cradle, holding him close, and walked quickly back to the cabin to bar the door. When Thomas came home that evening, she told him what had happened. His face went white, then red with rage. "They came here. They threatened you and Toby." "I will find them and Thomas." "No," Tala interrupted. "If you go after them, you will end up in jail or worse. They are not worth it. I handled it and they left. That is what matters." "But what if they come back?" Thomas demanded. "What if next time there are more of them?" "Tala, I cannot be here every moment to protect you." "I can protect myself," Tala reminded him. "I have been doing it for years. But you are right that we need to be more careful. Maybe we need a dog, something that will alert us when people approach. And I will keep the rifle even closer from now on." Thomas was not satisfied, but he recognized the determination in Tala's voice. They did get a dog, a shepherd mix from one of Tom Talbot's ranch hands who was giving away puppies. They named him Scout, and he proved to be both intelligent and loyal, quick to bark when anyone approached the property. As Toby grew into a toddler, the homestead continued to thrive. Their cattle herd had grown to 12 head, and they were making enough to live on, if not to save much. Thomas still worked part-time for Tom Talbot, which provided steady income and valuable experience. Tala managed the homestead and raised Toby, teaching him both English and the Apache words she knew, telling him stories from both sides of his heritage. Toby was a happy child, quick to smile and laugh, curious about everything. He looked like a perfect blend of both his parents, with Thomas's strong build and Tala's dark coloring. When they took him into town, people stared, sometimes with hostility, sometimes with mere curiosity. But Toby was too young to understand prejudice, and Thomas and Tala were determined to raise him with love and confidence, teaching him to be proud of who he was. In the summer of 1880, Tala discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was less of a shock and more of a quiet joy. They had proven they could manage with one child, and a second seemed like a natural next step. "I hope it is a girl this time," Thomas said, his hand on Tala's belly. "A daughter who looks just like you." "I hope it is healthy," Tala said practically. "Boy or girl, it does not matter as long as the child is whole and well." This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Tala knew what to expect. She continued working as long as she could, only slowing down in the final weeks. Mrs. Chen came to stay with them a week before the due date, wanting to be sure she did not miss the birth. The baby came on a cool March morning in 1881, arriving much faster than Toby had. Tala's labor lasted only 5 hours, and Thomas barely had time to worry before Mrs. Chen was announcing, "Another boy. You have 2 sons now." The baby was smaller than Toby had been, with lighter skin and a cap of brown hair that would eventually darken. They named him Theodore Samuel Thorne, Theodore after Tala's middle name that her father had given her, and Samuel after Thomas's grandfather. Theo for short. Toby, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby brother. He wanted to hold him and touch him and help with everything. "Gentle," Tala would remind him constantly. "You must be gentle with Theo. He is very small and delicate." Watching his sons together, watching his family grow and thrive, Thomas felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what he had come west for, even if he had not known it at the time. Not gold, not fortune, but this. A wife he loved, children who were healthy and happy, a home they had built with their own hands. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work. Spring meant calving and planting. Summer meant long days tending the herd and the garden. Fall meant roundup and harvest. Winter meant hunkering down and surviving until the cycle began again. Their herd grew to 20 head, then 30. They built a new, larger barn and expanded the cabin to have 2 bedrooms so the boys could have their own space. Toby and Theo grew like weeds, strong and healthy. Toby was serious and responsible, always wanting to help his parents with their work. Theo was more mischievous, the one who got into trouble and then charmed his way out of it with his big smile. They fought like all brothers did, but they also loved each other fiercely, a team against the world. The prejudice they faced never entirely went away, but it did diminish somewhat. As people in Placerville saw that Thomas and Tala's marriage was lasting, that they were hard workers who caused no trouble, the overt hostility faded into grudging acceptance. There were still those who would never accept a mixed family, but there were also more people like Mrs. Henderson and Tom Talbot, people who judged by character rather than blood. In 1885, Tom Talbot offered to sell Thomas and Tala a parcel of land adjacent to their homestead, good grazing land with a year-round creek. The price was fair, more than fair, and it would double the size of their property. But it would also require taking out a loan from the bank, something that made both of them nervous. "It is a risk," Thomas admitted as they discussed it one evening after the boys were asleep. "If we have a bad year, if we lose cattle to disease or drought, we could lose everything. But if we do not take this chance, we may never get another opportunity like this," Tala countered. "Tom is offering this land to us specifically because he wants to see us succeed. He is not getting any younger, and he wants to know the land will go to people who will care for it." They wrestled with the decision for weeks before finally agreeing to take the risk. The bank in Placerville, surprisingly, approved their loan. The manager, a practical man named Mr. Simmons, looked at their records and their assets and decided they were a good risk. regardless of the color of Tala's skin. With the new land, their operation grew even more. They hired help during busy seasons, young men looking for work who did not care about Thomas's choice of wife as long as the pay was fair. They bought more cattle, better bulls to improve the herd's quality. They put in fences and built a line shack on the far end of the property. By 1888, the ranch was profitable enough that Thomas could stop working for Tom Talbot and focus entirely on their own operation. It was bittersweet, leaving the man who had given him his first real chance, but Tom understood. "You have built something to be proud of," Tom told Thomas on his last day. "You and Tala both. You took nothing and made it into something real. That is the true American dream, no matter what the fools in town say." "I could not have done it without you," Thomas said, shaking the older man's hand. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. I will never forget that." "Just pass it on," Tom said. "When you see someone else struggling, someone who needs a hand up, you give it to them. That is how we make this world better." Thomas took those words to heart. In the years that followed, he and Tala hired drifters and outcasts, people that others would not give a chance. Some did not work out, but others thrived, and Thomas took satisfaction in knowing he was providing opportunities the way Tom Talbot had once done for him. Toby and Theo grew into young men, both tall and strong, capable of a full day's work. Toby, now 17, was quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for working with animals. Theo, 15, was more outgoing, the one who could talk their way into or out of anything. They still had their squabbles, but they were a united front when it came to the ranch and their family. Both boys were aware of their mixed heritage and the complications it brought. They had faced their share of taunts and fights over the years. But Thomas and Tala had raised them to be proud of who they were, to never apologize for their existence. "You come from two strong peoples," Tala told them. "You carry the courage of the Apache and the determination of your father's people. You are not less because of your mixed blood. You are more." In 1890, Tala turned 35 and Thomas 42. They had been married for 13 years, together for 14. It felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. They still loved each other as fiercely as they had in those early days, though the passion had deepened into something richer, more complex. They knew each other's rhythms, could communicate with a glance, finished each other's sentences. One evening that summer, they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build. Toby and Theo were out checking the herd, Scout lying at their feet. The air was warm and filled with the scent of sage and the distant lowing of cattle. "You remember the day we met?" Thomas asked, taking Tala's hand. "Of course," Tala said, a smile playing at her lips. "You were about to let a rattlesnake bite you because you were too foolish to watch where you walked." "And you saved my life," Thomas said. "You did not have to. You could have let that snake bite me and gone on with your day, but you did not." "I am glad I did not," Tala said softly. "Everything good in my life came from that moment. You, our sons, this ranch. All of it started when I decided to save one foolish cowboy from his own carelessness." Thomas raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "And then I told you that I wanted to save you from loneliness." "Do you think I succeeded?" Tala turned to look at him fully, her dark eyes warm with love. "You did more than save me from loneliness, Thomas. You gave me a family. You gave me a home. You gave me a purpose and a future. You loved me when I did not think anyone could. You stayed when everyone told you to leave. You built this life with me, stood beside me through every hardship. So yes, you saved me from loneliness. You saved me from giving up. You saved me from a life half-lived." Thomas felt emotion tighten his throat. "You saved me too, you know. I was dead inside when we met, just going through the motions. You woke me up, reminded me what it felt like to be alive. Everything I am, everything we have built, it is because you took a chance on me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to purple. Then Tala said, "Thomas, do you have any regrets? About giving up the gold prospecting, about marrying me, about the hard life we have lived?" "Not a single one," Thomas said without hesitation. "I found something more valuable than gold the day I met you. I found home, I found love, I found purpose. What more could any man want?" "I feel the same," Tala said. "There were times when I thought I would die alone, that I would never have what other women had. Children, a husband, a home. And then you stumbled into my life with your foolish ways and your open heart, and everything changed. I would not trade our life for anything." As if on cue, they heard Toby and Theo's voices approaching, arguing good-naturedly about something. A moment later, the two young men came into view, dusty and tired but grinning. "Herd looks good, Pa," Toby reported. "All accounted for, no signs of trouble." "And the new calf is doing well," Theo added. "The one that was weak last week seems to have turned a corner." "Good work, both of you," Thomas said. "Go wash up. Your mother has stew keeping warm." The boys went inside, their voices and the clatter of dishes filling the evening air. Thomas and Tala remained on the porch a moment longer, savoring the peace. "This is enough," Tala said quietly. "This right here. Our son's healthy and strong, our ranch thriving. You beside me. This is enough. This is everything." "This is everything," Thomas agreed, pulling her close. "More than I ever dreamed possible." They went inside to join their sons, closing the door on the gathering darkness. Inside, the cabin was warm and filled with light and laughter, the sound of family. Outside, the stars began to emerge one by one, shining down on the land they had claimed, the life they had built. The years continued their steady march. Toby fell in love with a rancher's daughter named Emily, a practical woman with a good head for business. They married in 1894, when Toby was 23 and Emily 21. Thomas and Tala welcomed her into the family, and Emily proved herself a capable addition to the ranch operation. She and Tala became close, two strong women who understood the demands of ranch life. Toby and Emily's first child, a daughter they named Sarah after Thomas's first wife, was born in 1895. Thomas held his granddaughter and wept, thinking of the woman he had loved and lost so long ago, grateful that her memory could be honored this way. Tala understood, had never been jealous of Sarah's memory, knowing that a heart was big enough to love more than once. Theo took longer to settle down, preferring to roam and work other ranches, learning different methods and meeting new people. But in 1897, he came home with a bride of his own, a Mexican woman named Rosa, whose family had a small ranch near Sacramento. Rosa was tiny but fierce, quick to laugh and quick to defend herself. She and Tala bonded immediately over their shared experiences of prejudice and perseverance. With the next generation growing up on the ranch, Thomas and Tala gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, letting Toby take over more of the management. They were both feeling their age now, Thomas nearing 50 and Tala in her early 40s. The hard years of physical labor had taken their toll, leaving aches and pains that did not fade, but they were content. They had built something that would last beyond them, a legacy for their children and grandchildren. The ranch that had started as Tala's small homestead now encompassed over 1,000 acres and ran more than 100 head of cattle. It was a significant operation, respected throughout the region. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Thomas and Tala hosted a gathering at the ranch to celebrate. All their family was there. Toby and Emily with their 3 children, Theo and Rosa with their first baby on the way, Tom Talbot and his daughter, Mrs. Henderson from town, and a handful of other friends they had made over the years. As Thomas looked around at the assembled crowd, at the people who had become their community despite all the obstacles, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had started with nothing, with only their love and determination, and they had built this. A family, a home, a life worth living. That night, after everyone had left or bedded down in the various outbuildings, Thomas and Tala lay in their bed, the same bed they had shared for over 20 years. "We did well, did we not?" Tala whispered in the darkness. "We did better than well," Thomas replied. "We did amazing." "I love you, Thomas Thorne. I have loved you since the day you asked to save me from loneliness. And I love you, Tala Thorne. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They fell asleep in each other's arms, 2 souls who had found their other half against all odds in the wild lands of California, under the vast western sky. The years that followed were good ones. Thomas and Tala became the beloved grandparents, the elders of a growing family. They spent their days in quieter pursuits now, Thomas teaching his grandchildren to ride and rope, Tala teaching them the Apache words and stories she had learned from her mother, keeping that heritage alive for another generation. In 1905, they celebrated 28 years of marriage. Their sons threw them a party, and half the county turned out. Even the people who had once scorned them came, because time had proven Thomas and Tala's worth, had shown that their love was real and lasting. They had outlasted the prejudice, had simply existed until existence itself became acceptance. Thomas was 57 now, his hair gone gray and his face weathered by decades of sun and wind. Tala was 50, still beautiful, still strong, though her hair too was starting to silver. They moved slower than they once had, but they moved together, always together. In the spring of 1908, Thomas caught a fever after working in the rain to help Toby with a sick cow. At first it seemed like nothing serious, just a cold that would pass. But the fever worsened, settling into his lungs, and despite all of Tala's care and Mrs. Chen's medicines, he grew weaker. Tala sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand, refusing to leave. Their sons and daughters-in-law took turns sitting with them, bringing food and water, helping however they could. But they all knew that Thomas was slipping away. On a mild evening in April, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in the colors Thomas had always loved, he opened his eyes and found Tala's face. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice weak. "I wanted more time with you." "Do not apologize," Tala said, tears streaming down her face. "You have given me 31 years of happiness. You have given me everything. I am the one who should thank you." "No regrets?" Thomas asked, echoing their conversation from so many years ago. "Not a single one," Tala confirmed. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Thomas Thorne." "The very best thing." Thomas smiled, a shadow of his usual grin but still unmistakably him. "You saved my life that day in the desert, and then you saved it every day after. I love you, Tala. I will love you forever." "I love you too," Tala whispered. "Go peacefully, my husband. I will be fine. Our sons will take care of me, and I will join you when my time comes. This is not goodbye. This is just see you later." Thomas squeezed her hand one final time, then closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, became shallow, and then, as the last light faded from the sky, it stopped altogether. Tala held him as he passed, her tears falling on his still face, her heart breaking and whole at the same time. She had loved him with everything she was, and he had loved her the same way. That love had sustained them through decades of hardship and joy, and it would sustain her still, even now that he was gone. They buried Thomas on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains and valleys he had worked so hard to tame. The entire community turned out for the funeral, a testament to the life he had lived and the respect he had earned. Toby and Theo stood on either side of their mother, holding her up as she said goodbye to the man who had changed her life so completely. Tala lived another 12 years after Thomas passed, staying on the ranch, helping where she could, watching her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren be born. She never remarried, never even considered it. Thomas had been her one and only, and she was content with the memories they had made together. She died peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1920, at the age of 65. Her sons buried her next to Thomas on the hill, reuniting them even in death. On her tombstone, they carved the words she had requested. She saved his life, and he saved her from loneliness. Together, they saved each other. The ranch continued to thrive under Toby's management and eventually passed to his children and grandchildren. The Thorne family became a fixture in the region, respected and successful. And every generation heard the story of Thomas and Tala, the cowboy and the Apache woman who had defied the odds and built something lasting out of love and determination. Their story became a legend in its own right, passed down through the family and the community. It was a reminder that love could transcend prejudice, that determination could overcome any obstacle, that two people who refused to give up on each other could change the world in their own small but significant way. The cabin where they had lived was eventually replaced by a larger house, but the old porch where they had sat so many evenings remained, preserved as a memorial. Family members would sit there sometimes, watching the sunset over the land, feeling the presence of Thomas and Tala, the two souls who had started it all with nothing more than courage and love. And if the wind blew just right on certain evenings, some swore they could hear laughter, the sound of two voices intertwined, still together, still in love, still saving each other from loneliness even beyond the boundaries of life itself. The rattlesnake that had brought them together had been a moment of danger that transformed into a lifetime of love, proving that sometimes the most frightening moments can lead to the most beautiful outcomes. The ranch stood as a monument to their determination, acres of land that had been carved from wilderness by two people who refused to be defeated by circumstance or prejudice. Every fence post, every building, every tree planted carried within it the story of Thomas and Tala, the cowboy who had been saved from a rattlesnake and the Apache woman who had saved him, and how together they had built a life that defied every expectation and exceeded every dream. Their great-grandchildren would walk the land and hear stories of the day their great-grandfather nearly died from a snake bite, of how their great-grandmother had pulled him to safety with hands made strong from surviving alone. They heard about the marriage that almost did not happen because the law would not recognize it, about the priest who married them anyway because love was more important than prejudice. They heard about the hard years and the lean times, about the neighbors who helped and the ones who did not, about the gradual acceptance that came not from changing who they were, but from refusing to apologize for existing. And they learned that the greatest legacy Thomas and Tala had left was not the land or the cattle or the buildings. It was the proof that love could conquer hate, that persistence could overcome prejudice, that two people committed to each other could weather any storm. It was the knowledge that family came in many forms and colors, and that what mattered was not the blood that ran in your veins but the love that filled your heart. On the hill where Thomas and Tala were buried, their headstones stood side by side, weathered by time but still strong, still together. When the wind swept across the high desert, it seemed to whisper their story to anyone who would listen. A story of danger and rescue, of loneliness and salvation, of two souls who had found each other in the vast wilderness and had created something beautiful and lasting. The Wild West had been a place of opportunity and hardship, of dreams pursued and sometimes achieved. For Thomas and Tala, it had been the backdrop to the greatest love story they could have imagined. From a single moment when a rattlesnake strike brought two people together, to a lifetime of love and family and achievement, their story embodied everything that made the American West both challenging and magical. As the decades passed and the 20th century gave way to new eras, the Thorne family continued to grow and thrive. Some stayed on the ranch, continuing the tradition Thomas and Tala had started. Others moved to cities, pursued different dreams, lived different lives. But they all carried within them the legacy of their ancestors, the knowledge that they came from strength and love and determination. And sometimes, when family gathered on the old ranch for reunions and celebrations, they would make a pilgrimage to the hill where Thomas and Tala rested. They would stand before those weathered headstones and silently thank them for the life they had built, for the love they had shared, for the legacy they had left. They would remember the story of how it all began, with a rattlesnake, a rescue, and a cowboy who promised to save an Apache woman from loneliness. It was a promise Thomas had kept every day of their life together, just as Tala had saved him not just from the snake but from a life of emptiness and grief. They had saved each other, truly and completely, and in doing so had created something that would last long after they were gone. Their love had become legend, their determination had become inspiration, and their life together had become proof that the best things in life were worth fighting for, no matter the obstacles. The sun continued to rise and set over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant colors, just as it had done on that first evening, when Thomas and Tala had sat by the stream and begun to believe in second chances. The land remained, solid and enduring, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on them. And in the hearts of every person who heard their story, Thomas and Tala lived on, forever young, forever in love, forever proving that a single act of courage, a rattlesnake strike avoided, could change the course of lives and create a legacy that would echo through generations. They had started with nothing but each other, and that had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything.